Just another quick word from the Lord. He's telling me that some people are going to live because of you. Now, this doesn't mean that every single person is going to live because of every single person. I'll break it down a bit. What he's telling me is that there's some people that, for lack of better words, deserve to die for the things that they have done, okay? Whether they be to you or to others or just to God, just as like a person in general. It's no different than, say you have a beautiful garden and you have weeds coming up. You don't see the weeds coming up with the roses and just be like, oh, those are such nice, pretty weeds. Let me just leave them. No, because they'll choke out those roses, right? And they're weeds. They're not flowers. They don't do anything. They're useless. So therefore, they actually deserve to have Roundup sprayed on them or to be pulled or whatever, which in case if that happens, they die, right? Because they don't serve a purpose. So some of these people are like weeds. Now, there's Christians out there that like to say, oh, well, if you say that, you're not Christian. No, if you say that, then you're religious. It's the facts of the matter. I mean, have you ever cracked the Bible? If you read the Bible, David wasn't sweet and cute and nice to Goliath, right? He had a mission, and that was to take him down. We see it all the time. Look at the people that threw Daniel in the lion's den. Was God real cute and sweet with them? No, he wasn't, right? And those were humans as well. So, and then look at even with Saul. Obviously, God created Saul, but when he did what he did, and it went on for so long, and he was corrupt. So therefore, God's like, no more for you, right? So religious people like to try to say to other people that are Christians, like that they believe in God, that for you to say what I'm saying or to talk this way, that's not Christian of you. Well, who said that? Who said that? Because I've read quite a bit of the Bible, and when you read the Bible, look what happened to Haman. You know what I mean? There's a lot of humans. God created all humans. We all know that. Okay. But there's humans that were succeeded and some that were not, right? So therefore, what made the difference was that they, at some point in their life, became like weeds to the Lord. So whether that be because of the things that they did in that like specific time, like say with Daniel, whether it be because they threw Daniel in the den, or whether it be because maybe, who knows, the Bible doesn't say, but maybe those same men did a bunch of things prior to Daniel, and Daniel was the last straw, right? So whatever. My point is that there's some people, God loves all of us, we're his humans, he loves us, yes. But there's some people that, due to whatever it may be, they have become like weeds to the Lord. And so when there's weeds in your garden, you pull them out, right? And God does the same thing. When there's weeds in his figurative garden, he pulls them out too, right? So with that said, there's people that have turned into weeds, and they deserve to be pulled out, choked out, and therefore die, wither away, no different than pulling weeds out of a garden bed. But because of you, so don't get me wrong, that will happen to some people because it just is what it is. But because of you, if you are a Christian, if you care for that person and you've followed the Lord and you've turned over a new page and you're walking with the Lord, you have saved some of those people, aka weeds. You've saved them. Now that doesn't mean that things are going to be roses and butterflies for them, because it's not. They're still going to have to go through a judgment, because no human can judge a man, right? God does the judging. So therefore, if we want a weed to live, that's up to God. If we want a weed to die, that's up to God. We don't have the say on that. But what God's telling me is that some of these people, it doesn't matter if they think they're Christian or not, or if they were a Christian, or this, that, and the third. For whatever reasons, you or not, it depends, who knows, I don't know. But they are considered weeds to the Lord, okay? And God is not going to allow all these weeds to just choke out his beautiful roses that he spent time growing and pruning and growing, right? Because then the rose could die, and he's not going to let that happen. A rose has more use than a weed. And we can even understand that in our own world, right? We can understand that. So God is going to remove these weeds. It's a matter of time. Now, he's not going to come along and just take out all the weeds on one day. Like, all the weeds are gone. No, it's going to be a process. You'll see this weed go, maybe a month later, this other weed, maybe a year later, this other weed, maybe 2 days later, this other weed. But slowly but surely, God will pluck those weeds out. And what happens when you pull a weed out of the ground? It dies, right? Could take it 10 minutes, could take it a day. but that weed is going to wither away because it doesn't have the soil to continue growing no longer. So he is going to do that. But in some cases, because of some people, they are going to be saved. They're still going to have a hard time. They're going to go through judgment, and that's not going to be pretty, but they will be spared. And the one reason, like the main reason, will be because of you. Because like, okay, so just talk about, say, your partner or your family, okay? Say God has deemed your partner to be a weed or a family member to be a weed, okay? Now, whether you agree with it or not is irrelevant. That's what God's decided. He's determined that. So if you yourself have stopped sinning, you've repented to the Lord, you've picked up your cross, you followed him, you've turned over a new page, if you love that person, like that's your brother, your mother, your partner, your husband, wife, whatever role they may play, if they're a close associate to you and you love them, and perhaps you've even prayed for them, God, of course, makes the final judgment call, not you, but in some of these judgment calls, he's decided that that person will be spared and that they too will turn over a new page of some sort. Now, they may not be like the full-blown Christian that you are, but they will. He's deemed them savable, I guess, I don't know, this is again not me, this is him telling me, but I guess some of these weeds are through and through weeds, like just trash garbage, okay? But then some of these weeds are salvageable. They could maybe turn into a flower, or they'll never be a rose, but they could maybe do some budding, some pruning, like kind of like a dandelion is not as bad of a weed as, say, like crabgrass or something like that, right? It's the same idea. There's some noxious, toxic weeds that you just absolutely have to get rid of. They're toxic to humans, animals, whatever. They're just garbage. But then there's some weeds that have a purpose. Like with dandelions, it's a weed, but you can make dandelion tea, things like that. Does a dandelion compare to a rose? No, it doesn't. But you get what I'm trying to say. So some of these weeds are just these noxious, toxic weeds that have to go. No ifs, ands, or buts. And that judgment calls up to God and God only. Some of these other weeds are like dandelions where they could be salvageable. They could potentially serve a purpose after he's done some pruning and judgment, first call judgment and then do some pruning to them. But he refuses to allow these subpar weeds to choke out his beautiful roses that he's took time, effort, and energy to grow and prune and develop, right? So what I'm saying is, because of you, God will turn those weeds that were deemed noxious, whatever, 6 months, a year ago, 2 years ago, whatever their time was deemed, he will turn them into the dandelion, the salvageable weed, because of you, because you prayed, you changed, you loved, you cared, you had a pure heart. You basically provided the miracle grow for them to be converted, if that makes any sense. Again, like, it's so hard for me to explain these things because they're so spiritual, and I'm trying to put them in mortal terms that we can understand. But yeah, so you're the miracle grow for that weed. You allowed it to make that conversion, okay? So had it have not been for you picking up your cross and making the choice and choosing to do what you do, they would have been deemed a noxious weed and been deemed set for the trash like the other ones are going to be, okay? So you're saving lives. You really are. Because not only, we like to think, we're saving lives because we're bringing people to Christ. Yes, true. But you're also saving lives unknowingly because of situations like this where God's like, well, had you have not picked up your cross and followed me, who knows what your fate would have been, and they would have been deemed a noxious, toxic weed sent for the trash. But because you picked up your cross, you became a rose that I was able to prune and develop and take glory in. And you also, in turn, were able to turn over the page for these other noxious weeds into being salvageable weeds. So, yeah, that's basically what God is saying, is that your choice to give yourself life gave life to others around you. Now, this doesn't necessarily apply to a stranger that you see at the store. This is someone that's close to you, like someone who, is what we'd say maybe more lukewarm and you're not. You have, unbeknownst to you, due to your obedience and diligence, you have saved them from a perishable fate. And now they could have a second chance to give something out, something productive, Whereas prior to you doing that, they were just deemed unfit. So yeah, that's amazing. So yeah, there's a lot of glory that comes to walking with the Lord. And he just put this message on my heart to put out to let people know that that's what he's saying, is that your choice to save yourself saved others. So that's amazing.